Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh, welcoming you to our first instalment of World Warships gameplay on our channel for 2018. This time round featuring the Tier 5 American aircraft carrier known as the Bogue in a Tier 5 domination game on the map Solomon Islands. You're probably wondering at this point, why am I featuring a carrier gameplay for the first time now, seeing as I've had a good number of years to do so. Well, I'll be frank with you. 2018 for me in World Warships is going to be the year in which I resolve to become a better carrier player, or at least focus on grinding my way up the American carrier tech tree, as up until this point I've pretty much neglected playing aircraft carriers whatsoever. And I personally feel that this gameplay is a nice one in which I started to improve my craft as a low tier carrier player, and I made a good number of calls here. And there may be some items that you as a player, starting your way into carriers, can take away from this gameplay. Now straight away, what we can see is I've asked my teammates, are they going towards Objective Alpha or Charlie? Because I want to know where the main push is going. Because one of the limitations with the 111 build, i.e. the squadron build which you were forced to have on the Bogue with the recent update to the American aircraft carrier squadron lineups, one fighter, one torpedo bomber, one dive bomber in this case, is that you do not have the ability to spread a large number of squadrons around the skies, compared to say your Japanese counterpart, the Tier 5 Zuho. I believe it has at least one more squadron, but don't quote me on that. Therefore, I want to expend all of my energy where possible in helping my team to win a given flank of the map, at which point I can then start to divert my attention elsewhere and then focus my energies into the second flank. In the meantime, I've sent my fighters over Objective Bravo because I want to do some scouting south of Bravo, looking towards the enemy fleet that's going towards Alpha, give my team the heads up on what's going to be contesting the objective. And we've been able to spot a Miyagi, a Kirov, a Svetlana and a Wyoming. Now we know both of the enemy's battleships are going to Objective Alpha, and we know two key cruisers are going towards Alpha as well. So that's good information for our team. But at this point I have to make a call with my fighters, which is, do I go after the enemy bombers or do I try and lock up the enemy fighters over Objective Bravo, neutral ground essentially, at which point nobody can get their friendly AA, i.e. their fleet's AA, to support the fighter engagement, and it really comes down to who's got the better fighter setup. So that's why I'm trying to bait the enemy fighters a little bit further into Bravo, but they don't want any of it, and soon it's just going to be a crunch in which we meet right in the middle and just duke it out. But in the meantime, what you'll notice, all this distraction, if you will, is enabling our bombers to make their way towards Objective Alpha. As finally our Langley commits their fighters into the centre and locks up the enemy fighters, and we're going to come in from behind. Now whilst we're looking at that, let's come back to the bombers. So they're making their way towards the southwest objective, i.e. Objective Alpha. What are my intentions at this point? Well, we can see that the enemy Wyoming is by itself. And my logic here is that whilst the Wyoming does have a powerful AA suite, a single battleship by itself is not going to be able to bring down the brunt of 12 bombers, i.e. 6 dive bombers, 6 torpedo bombers. So we're heading in. But I'm also keeping my eye on the enemy Kirov, a very fragile cruiser that will not want to go head to head with our battleships such as our Kaiser, and they're starting to turn. So I divert my dive bombers and my torpedo bombers onto the Kirov to shut them out of the game, because they're exposing a perfect broadside for a torpedo run and exposing their linear profile for our dive bombers. And it works out just right, because that Kirov soaks up every torpedo. And that's their game over in a nutshell. In the meantime, we can see that our fighters were able to clean the skies over Bravo, and now they can start to go hunting those torpedo bombers which are trying to retreat back towards their carrier. So what we saw there in our bomber attack was the fact that whilst we did have one objective in mind, we switched the target. Whereby we're not completely committed to one target and one target alone. If we see an opportunity, we'll go for it, and we're perfectly poised there. But this comes on to a bigger point about engaging with your teammates in a carrier, which I found is very important, at least at the lower tiers. Now when we talk about engagement, what you can see is I have sacrificed the entire northeastern corner. I'm pretty ignorant of that corner because unless the enemy fighters are all gone, I'm not going to send my fighters away from the southwest for the time being. But it's not only in that, it's also in terms of where my carrier is placed right now. I'm not sitting in spawn. With our limited top speed of 16.5 knots, which is absolutely punishing and means you get very quickly isolated from your teammates if you sit in spawn all game, we've actually moved up to the western island map, and we're right with our fleet, which leads to a bit of a dilemma for the enemy carriers, which is for every reload they can commit to with their aircraft, we can probably get off 1.5, because we're closer to the engagement area and it means our planes get back and rearm faster. i.e. the mean time between travelling from the carrier to the strike point and back is shorter for us compared to the enemy and compared to our other friendly carrier. Now in the meantime we can see that the enemy fighters are making their way back towards the southwestern corner, and we're going to lock them up using our fighters. And as we lock them up, our torpedo bombers can come in towards the Bogue, who, as we said earlier, much like the Wyoming, they are isolated. They've only got a T-22 and a Svetlana supporting them, but not very close, and the AA on those ships is rather poor. The Bogue's AA is poor as well. That Wyoming's too distant to provide the AA support which would be needed, which means that all 6 of our torpedo bombers can make their way in pretty much not at a disadvantage. And our dive bombers can also make their way in at full squadron strength and strike the Bogue. Now some of you who are more experienced at carrier gameplay at this point will notice I've made a mistake. But what is it? Right, well we struck the Bogue and we caused flooding and a fire. In the top right corner of our screen we can see that the damage is ticking, i.e. the flooding and the fires are sticking. But what if the Bogue had had their damage control consumable available? I didn't account for that. And therefore what it could have been the case is we struck with all those bombs and torpedoes, and then the Bogue pressed the damage control consumable key and they put all of the bleed damage out and prevented us from eliminating them from the game. Now we were lucky there that they already had to use it previously, but we didn't account for that. And with there only being a 5-second timer, we could have very easily accounted for that consumable being active. I just hit them with the dive bombers, caused the fire, 5 seconds later they put the fire out but they've got no damage control available anymore, then going with the torpedo bombers for the final blow. But we got to learn. In the meantime we're observant of the fact the enemy Emerald is in Objective Bravo, and we're starting to move our carrier a little bit more towards Alpha. We're just creeping away from them, sticking close to the western landmass. That way, if they do want to come and hunt us, they've got to come the long way round and really stay close to the landmass, exposing their full broadside for anyone who would be lingering off from the landmass slightly, i.e. along the 1 and 2 lines up in the northern side of the map, so that northwestern corner. Trying to make things hard for people to pursue us. In the meantime, you will have noticed in the chat just about roughly 30 seconds ago, our Furitaka was stating that the enemy torpedo bombers are coming in for them up on the northern side of the map, so I've sent my fighters up there to intercept. And they're just preventing the southern section of the torpedo bomber squadrons from being able to cross-drop the Furitaka by the looks of things, as we go bomber hunting. In the meantime, I'm constantly keeping an eye on Objective Bravo, seeing what's going on. The Emerald's actually making its way towards Objective Charlie, i.e. the enemy one. And with all the enemy fighters eliminated thanks to our fighters, it means we can now go and try and finish off the Wyoming. And this time I'm going to space out my strikes. I'm going to correct myself from the Bogue, whereby I'm going with the dive bombers first. We set a fire, and you'll note that the ticking on that fire stops very shortly, which tells me the damage control consumable is active. And because it lasts a long time on American battleships, I believe it's 20 seconds, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm waiting for 20 seconds to pass according to the in-game timer, or roughly that, say 15 seconds because it'll take 5 seconds for us to get the torpedoes off. But once that time's up, I'll go back in with the torpedo bombers and try to go for the finishing strike. And here go my torpedo bombers. In the meantime, we can see that only one of the torpedo bomber squadrons managed to get away from our Furitaka up in the north. Our fighters did a good job of eliminating the other squadron. And we're bringing our fighters home at this point, now that they're down to less than 40% of their ammunition. And with our torpedo bombers going in, is it going to be enough? Well, unfortunately not. They got 2 torpedo strikes and they didn't get any flooding, but still that Wyoming is on its last legs, and we can probably use a set of dive bombers to eliminate them in a short time. Now you're probably wondering at this point, how on earth have your fighters been able to take so much damage, and how on earth have they got so much ammunition? Well, I've gone for a fighter build on my Bogue, which is that I've tried to buff out the statistics of my fighters wherever possible, because I want air supremacy to operate my bombers with impunity. So I've taken Air Groups Mod 1 and Air Groups Mod 2 as my upgrades, the former being a 10% buff to your fighter damage per second, and the latter being a 20% buff to your fighter health balls. We've also got the Captain Skill or Dogfighting Expert, which gives you a plus 10% bonus to your fighter's ammunition capacity. Because we always want to make it unscathed to the end of the game on ammunition capacity, like in War Thunder we do with fuel. But outside of that, as our dive bombers come in to finish off the Wyoming, what else is there to consider? Well, it looks as though the enemy team have faltered in their push for Charlie, as we have a Furitaka and an Emerald put in, who are both taking that objective. Our fighters at the moment are loitering above Objective Alpha, and I should really be sending them to loiter south of Objective Charlie to try and intercept those dive bombers as they make their return journey. But I'm also keeping an eye on what my teammates are saying, and they have previously told me they want B spotted. So I'm moving my fighters there first to see what's in Objective Bravo, if anything. But then I see the enemy torpedo bombers coming in. I immediately tell my teammates, no, the priority must be the bombers, because if they're allowed to strike you guys and get some flooding off, we can lose more ships. So as we're going in for the torpedo bombers, our own torpedo bombers are going in to hit the Svetlana. But note here how effectively, in a way, cross-dropping, it's not in the terms of aircraft carriers, but I call it cross-dropping the Svetlana alongside my teammates. Now what I mean by this is my teammates are attacking the Svetlana from their western side, and we attack them with our torpedoes from the northern side, which means in this perpendicular angle of attack, the Svetlana has to expose a broadside to someone, whether it's my teammates or my torpedo bombers, and there they were caught at a 45-degree angle between both sides and were able to help our team eliminate them. So that's what I mean when I say about cross-dropping in this instance, that we're using our teammates to provide the other side of the drop, or it's really a right angle drop, however you want to phrase it. But with the Svetlana gone, there's only one enemy ship that's not a carrier left, and it's a T-22 that's been loitering south of Objective Alpha all game, based on a number of torpedoes that have been whizzing past our teammates as they've tried to contest the objective. In the meantime, you'll see that I'm positioning my fighters north of the two enemy carriers, not within AA range, I don't want to lose my fighters unnecessarily, but the reason I've put them there is so that when the enemy carrier aircraft take off for more bombing runs, they have to go north because that's the way their decks are orientated, which means they're going to fly towards my bombers before they go anywhere else, and we can start to intercept them, we'll catch them up. We're coming in with our dive bombers towards the enemy Bogue. Hopefully we're going to set it on fire and cause it to bleed some more health, and now my bombers are coming in to attack the enemy dive bombers that took off of the Bogue. A little bit too far away to get right on their 6 straight away, but we'll get there in ample time. The torpedoes and the T-22 just ran out of range as we come around towards Objective Alpha. We're pushing around with our team, and our dive bombers did a good amount of damage to the Bogue as we're now pursuing the enemy dive bombers for our own fighters, and in come our torpedo bombers to try and take out one of the two carriers. Now you're probably wondering at this point, which one am I going to go for? Well, it's not going to be the Bogue because they've got no health and my teammates have got a clear shot on the Bogue. I don't want to waste my torpedoes and I don't want to frustrate my teammates in them expending all their ammunition. So instead I'm going to go for the more distant target, i.e. the enemy Hosho, going straight for them because the AA on the Bogue has pretty much been knocked out by the looks of things, and the Hosho has the greater health. So I want to get them out of the game with our teammates all clustered in, and we really want that crack, and we've worked for this one. So we're coming in, our boys are going to hit the target hopefully, and there go the torpedoes. Are they going to strike? And there we go, there's the Kraken. And with the enemy T-22 on its last legs as well, we need only watch now as our boys fly home for the day to pick up a cup of tea, and the T-22 falls to the bottom of the sea. So a thoroughly good game in the end, and we can see from our battle performance that we dealt out 97,673 HP of damage, picking up 4 achievements in the process. 2 devastating strikes whereby we destroyed an enemy ship with a single artillery salvo, torpedo salvo, or aircraft by causing damage to over 50% of the destroyed ship's normal health pool. Picked up the Kraken Unleashed, whereby we killed 5 or more enemies in a single match, and we also picked up the Clear Sky achievement, whereby in a single battle we destroyed more than 50% of the total enemy aircraft, including float planes launched by cruisers and battleships that could potentially be launched throughout the course of the match, destroying at least 30 aircraft as well, in this case a total of 37. Coming on to the team score, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,056. You could literally say that the carrier carried its team to victory, but personally I disagree with you. Our impact was huge, but only because we sailed with our team and supported the teammates who pushed the southwestern corner of the map. If we'd not worked with our teammates and positioned ourselves close by, we wouldn't have had the faster reload time on our bombers, i.e. getting to and from the target, reloading their armament and going back into the engagement, and on top of that we wouldn't have been able to synchronise with the salvos of our teammates in causing opponents to turn broadside to our bomber strikes. So we worked together rather than worked in isolation, also providing some spotting here and there as requested by our teammates, and some fighter or air superiority support we should say when needed against the enemy bombers. Coming on to our detailed report, our key item to note here is the damage caused upon our spotting, i.e. 51,780 HP, whereby this amounts to just over the full health of one of the enemy battleships or 2 cruisers put together. This serves to highlight how a carrier can cause damage not just via bombs and torpedoes being dropped, but also by just providing vision of the enemy fleet for their teammates, at which point their fleet can do the damage necessary to bring down the enemy fleet, despite the fact they wouldn't normally be able to see them if they were trying to spot the enemy fleet by themselves. Carriers have a role to always play in tandem with their fleet, not apart from the fleet. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, We walked away with 347,367 silver credits and 3,084 commander experience. To conclude, hopefully today we've demonstrated how as a low tier carrier player you can have a massive influence on the outcome of a given match, particularly if you work with your teammates, i.e. your battleships, cruisers and destroyers, in order to spot the enemy fleet and support them in bringing down the fleet over time. Attacking on side angles with your torpedo bombers and your dive bombers, whereas your teammates are shooting frontally with their main guns. On top of that, we saw how we were able to use our fighters in order to lock up the enemy carriers' fighters, making sure that our bombers were able to go into targets unhindered, and that via air superiority being gradually achieved over the course of the game, in the end our aircraft could operate with impunity, being able to gradually bring down the enemy fleet. I'm sure it's not going to be all this easy as I could make my way up the American tech tree, into the independence and so forth, but we'll learn as we go along, and hopefully you'll enjoy watching me and my journey to become a better carrier player over the course of 2018. But that's all we've got time for today, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. I've been TX141 as always, and until next time, take care and fair seas.